Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the week 6 art lecture. We're at the Evergreen State College and have an incredible event to look forward to with Cassie Thornton. My name is Eirik Steinhoff, and it's May 5th. We're coming towards the end of our school year. We've got one more event to look forward to. I'll drop a link into the chat here, an event in 2 weeks with Evergreen Literary Arts faculty, Miranda Mellis. I'm going to say a few words by way of an opening frame. Professor Mellis will introduce our guest for today, and then we'll have the art lecture with Cassie Thornton. So I wanted to begin by acknowledging that the Evergreen State College is situated on territory that was dispossessed, stolen from Indigenous people. Those of us who reside in the southernmost reach of the Salish Sea are living on the ancestral lands of the Medicine Creek Treaty Tribes, which include the Squaxin Island Tribe, the Nisqually Indian Tribe, and the Puyallup Tribe of Indians. The 1854 treaty ceding these lands has been the subject of incredible struggle and resistance, and also of unprecedented transformation. These treaty tribes all still reside in this area and are actively engaged with the land and their communities. All who are not Indigenous are visitors here. We recognize the traditional custodians of these lands and pay respect to elders past and present. We celebrate Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination and acknowledge that there is much more work to be done in this respect. So as I've said, this is the art lecture series, which was inaugurated about 10 years ago by Shaw Osha. She's on leave this quarter, but we have an immense debt of gratitude to Shaw for creating and sustaining this particular lecture series, which is designed to bring artists into Evergreen's community, into the Olympia community, and to foster conversation and exchange. It's been a wonderful experience for me to contribute this quarter to the curation of this series. I did want to thank Julie Ron for administrative support, and also to the incredible media services team with Raul and the rest of the media interns and employees. We cannot do this work without you all. It's invisible labor. It needs to be named, and I'm very grateful to you. I'll share a link with another series that's underway that I think might interest some of you. It's a series of public seminars on the topic of reimagining community safety. We have 1 or 2 events to look forward to this quarter. You can find out more about them on the link that I've just shared. I think you'll observe that today's lecture intersects with this topic of community safety in productive and provocative ways. There are also recordings available of earlier public seminars in that series at the link that I've shared. And with that, I think I'll turn things over to Miranda Mellis, and we can get this art lecture started.
Thank you, Eirik. Welcome, everyone. It's really a great pleasure and a great honor to introduce Cassie Thornton. We have these expressions: another world is possible, building a new world in the shell of the old, and there is another world, but it is in this one. These expressions intimate a different world, a changed world, that world of justice and care, of remediation and repair, collective responsibility and agency that we long for and so many of us are working for. Cassie's art does not only fight for that future, but I think embodies what it entails to bring it about, to realize it right now. And she does this above all playfully. She is the most seriously playful person. Play in all senses, including these perhaps unexpected etymons: plagon, vouch for and take charge of; plega, tend to; playen, to rejoice and be glad; phlegen, to take care of and cultivate, which is apparently connected to the root of the word plight. So this intersection of the word play, to take care of and cultivate, with the root of the word plight, for me is the dimension of, we might say, Cassie's praxis. There's also the meaning of perform or act, the senses of taking the role of or putting forward, making moves, throwing, laying on the table, or sense of operating, as in playing, and to cause, to play something, to bring it about. When we think about making cultural and political interventions, we benefit from remembering how central this sense of play is in order to challenge, as it were, the language games of power, wherever it keeps reproducing the mindsets that normalize forms of exclusionary violence. Language itself can hold in place the systematic, low-order pretenses to pragmatism that keep people houseless, that destroy habitat, and that force people to live on the streets by their millions. In this county alone, there are several thousand unhoused children. That, so to speak, rationalism is striated by irrationality, and that technology has metaphysics. These are things we've been discussing in my program, Literary Arts Capstone, this week. That colonial ways of thinking and doing remain so widely operative is not only due to what we call colloquially vested interests, vested from vestment, garb of consecration, at the root of investiture and investment. It is also due to the lack of recognition of the way that forms of description are ontological. For example, forms of storytelling and myth that extractive capital engage in, that reinforce mental models, that exclude the sacred dimensions of the life world. So doing the work is always also about challenging the kind of language games that get used to describe the world, wherever social agreements, sometimes called by the name of policy, are being made. When I think of Cassie, I think now here is someone who's not standing by and allowing definitions of what is possible to go unchallenged. Here is someone who has stopped waiting for someone else to figure it all out. Here is someone who trusts the vision of justice that is alive in her heart of hearts, who doesn't believe the stories that keep inequity in place, who takes the rational seeming necropolitical norms that reproduce poverty as her artistic material, who takes bureaucracy itself as her material, the way others take paint as theirs. For those of us fortunate enough to be alive alongside her, to witness, participate in, be changed by, and collaborate with her, it's clear Cassie is a supernatural witch, combining the skills of art, the knowledge of experience, the ethics of feminist economics, the passion of advocacy, the intelligence of organizing, the wisdom of spellcraft, the research of scholarship, and trickster sociology, but most of all, the heart of a healer, to make a way where it seems like there is no way. Her list of accomplishments is long. Her interventions are inspiring, and the changes she makes are real. Her collaborations are social activations, her publications riveting and unmissable. Please follow her work closely, learn from her, don't lose sight of her, take up her invitations. She is a visionary from whose praxis we can learn much of what to do and how to do it. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome Cassie Thornton back to Evergreen.
Wow, that is definitely the most amazing introduction that I've ever heard for really anyone, much less for me. Thank you so much. It's like I feel like a tree and I can kind of remember where my roots are a little bit. So thank you all so much for having me back. It feels like returning somewhere that I really love to be. And so much has happened for me through giving a few lectures and doing a few projects at Evergreen, organized by Miranda and Shaw and Eric. Yeah, so anyway, thank you so much for having me visit again. So I'm calling in from a place called Thunder Bay, which is in Ontario. Former, now we call it Canada. It's an Anishinaabe territory. And I'm going to talk a little bit about where I am. And it's so interesting how Miranda described my work, because I think I'm going to show the relationship between plight and play in a big way that I've never really gotten to tell this story before. So I'm so excited to try. How's that? Okay. I think it's useful to know that I have been an artist and an activist for many years, but that I usually lived in American cities, and I am American, and that I have recently moved to Canada, but that most of my work in the last decade has been about debt. Like, what is debt? How does it work as a force to kind of control and contain what we believe is possible? And it's definitely always a personal endeavor as well as a political endeavor that is very much about trying to understand my family and my context. And so I've spent all this time trying to understand debt, and that exploration has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger until kind of you'll see where I've gone with it. And I think that that's useful to know. Yeah, so I guess maybe I'll just start with this image, which is ice on Lake Superior. There's a couch on the ice. I think this was in January of 2019, I think. And these people are talking on the phone and their eyes are lit up. And this is an image that I organized as a way to advertise for a project called the Hologram, which I'm going to explain to you about. But I think it's really important to say that the people in the image are all the friends that I've made living in Thunder Bay. And the reason that I've met them is because I'm a part of a few collectives, mainly a feminist, Indigenous-led patrol group. And I think it's really been one of the biggest learning experiences of my life to work in a kind of care collective that is doing patrols to keep people, specifically Indigenous people, safe from all forms of colonial violence and control, but mainly the police. And so very much of what I've learned and put into the Hologram project, which is a peer-to-peer health project that's available for anybody, anywhere, has come from this place that I live in Thunder Bay, where the ice gets really, really thick in the winter when it's -40 for months and months, and where the colonial violence is so old and so deep, and really, it's a tough place. So here's this kind of grainy image of a waterfall that's in Thunder Bay, and this is a place I like to sit and read. And when I moved to Thunder Bay in 2017, many people who I met, white people, introduced this as a healing place, Thunder Bay as a healing place, as a beautiful place, a perfect place to live, a place you would never want to leave. And I found it quite an astoundingly beautiful place. And so I found some rocks here that were very, very old and that were so worn down by water that I could sit in it like perfectly. Like it made almost like the water has worn almost like couches into the rocks, and I could sit and read. And when I moved here, what I was reading was this book on the upper left of your screen, Seven Fallen Feathers. And a lot was happening in 2017 in this quote unquote healing place. Around then, this book came out called Seven Fallen Feathers, written by Tanya Talaga. And this was a book that was the first, I think, first big public chronicle of what was happening in Thunder Bay when many Indigenous youth were showing up dead in bodies of water. And this was a moment of, I think, one of the first times when Thunder Bay began to be seen as the racism and murder capital of Canada. And there's a lot of deep stories behind why this was the case, but it hasn't been solved. This is not a problem that's been fixed. But I think I arrived in Thunder Bay at a very, very intense moment of reckoning when people were starting to realize that they might live in a racist city and they might not know what racism is. And that's for both sides, no matter whether you're white or a person of color, Indigenous, It was a really big moment of reckoning. Around the second week that I lived in Thunder Bay, I attended my first public event, which was a vigil for a woman named Barbara Kentner, who had been walking down the street while Indigenous, and she had a trailer hitch thrown at her, which would eventually lead to her death. And it took until 2020 to have a trial. The person who threw the hitch, a person named Braden Bushby, who's white, was not held in jail, was not put on, paid his bail and escaped. And so he was just found guilty of manslaughter in the last few months. And we're waiting for his sentencing. But the very first event that I attended in Thunder Bay was an event to sort of give support to Barbara Kentner, who at the time was still alive. The same time, we found out in the news that someone named Adam Capay was being kept in the jail, which is in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, for 4 years in solitary confinement, awaiting trial for an attempted murder. And so this is an Indigenous person. And so all of these things were all piled up on each other. And then we found out that there was going to be 2 really big investigations of the police and the police board for systemic racism. And so I just wanted to give a little context for what gets called a healing place in Canada. And it's one of the most deafening and difficult places I've ever been, much less lived. So in terms of play has come really hard. And I'm gonna explain, I think, a little bit of what came out of this, because I think it's really important to say, like, Thunder Bay is a little slice of hell, and there's some really amazing people here doing a really incredible organizing that has taught me a lot. So this image below here is an image of a group of, I think you'll see 9 people wearing glow-in-the-dark safety vests. We're standing in front of a river at sunset. I think we had just gone on a patrol where we got in kayaks and made sure that there was no one kind of in a place that might cause them to be bothered by the police along the river, or no one was hurt near the river. And because, as I said before, a lot of youth have been showing up hurt, missing, or dead in the river, we patrol the river. So this is a group of, now we've been going on for about 4 years. And we're a group of people who patrol the city and make sure that everyone's okay. And we do this in cars, we do this walking, we do it on bike, we do it in canoe or kayak. We're always on patrol. And really going to the grocery store is going on patrol, because in this healing city, there is, like in all the places all of you live, an incredible homeless problem, but also a really big white supremacist and violent racist police problem. So one thing that I have learned before I even introduce the larger picture of what it is that we do is something called contextual fluidity. It is an idea that comes from Lakehead University, from Connie Nelson and Douglas McPherson, who have been in many departments, but came together specifically in the social work department of Lakehead University to think through like how to help better, and specifically how to have helping happen that is helping specifically in relation to food distribution, but how to specifically work together between settler and indigenous worldviews, and to begin to see moments of structural breakdown as possibility. So this word has moved around in lots of different ways, but members of our patrol sort of hijacked the term, and we've been using it all along. And I think it's a really useful term for all people who feel like they want to be helpful. And so for us, in our patrol group, contextual fluidity means that when you face a difficult situation, you don't look up to get help from authorities. You don't wait, you don't call, you look and see and know that you have the powers and the capabilities to confront all forms of all different types of emergency situations, because you're always already prepared. And so the example that one of my closest collaborators, Ivory Tuesday, told me is that when you live on a reservation, an Indigenous reservation in Canada, and you need help and there's an emergency, like literally if a house is on fire, you can't call the fire department always. They might not come for a whole different, large spectrum of reasons. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to see the situation and react to it. And this is really different in settler society, right? Like we're really used to being able to call for help when we see an emergency, or we're at least used to that idea. But in contextual fluidity, you face an emergency knowing that with positivity, knowing what your powers are, knowing what the powers are of the people around you, and having a really keen sense of what already exists in the land and all around, like what is possible given what we have right here. And so what does that mean when you're on patrol? It means that when we see somebody that is in a dire situation, we don't say, oh my God, are you okay? We see people that are in difficult situations and we're like, hey, are you all right? Like, is everything okay? It's a really different tone shift. It's like knowing that we have the powers to help and not that we're going to descend to support people. Like we're meeting them where they are. And contextual fluidity is something that I think we can all sort of take and use. I guess one other example I would say about it is that like in contextual fluidity, the way we practice it is we always visit the same places over and over again. So we know what's happening in the city and where. So we actually know what's up when something's different. And so it's like taking a kind of, without taking ownership, taking a kind of being with a place, understanding its ebbs and flows, and then knowing when something's not right and being able to respond to it with a kind of possibility and potentiality. I'm sorry that I feel a little bit rocky in explaining all of this because I don't often explain this stuff as an individual. I'm always a part of a collective when I'm talking about this group. So thanks for being patient. But so the group is called Window Debwe Masewin. And there's a whole big story behind why we're called that and how we got that name. But it means walking together in truth in Anishinaabe-Moan. Which is also called Ojibwe. I want to read you our mission statement, which we wrote together after going through a lot of really difficult crises involving the police, because I think this is a really powerful text. Window Debwe Masewin is made up of caring volunteers and friends dedicated to imagining and creating a feminist and decolonized form of community safety together in Thunder Bay. We formed to raise up the voices of the silenced and to respond to the violence in our community, especially violence against women, Two-Spirit people, and youth. We formed because the city's leadership and police have not yet proven themselves worthy of the community's trust. We formed to help all people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, through love, care, and solidarity. We believe that the forms of care, love, and safety we need can be produced by everyday people and that it can change the world. To rediscover our powers together, we use two-eyed seeing, drawing on both Indigenous traditions and settler ways. We welcome people of all ancestries to join us. Decolonization means a world where everyone can contribute and thrive, free of violence, oppression, and poverty. That is the world we're helping to create. To get there, we focus on delivering care in many forms. We share stories and speak truth to power. We trade skills and build relationships. We patrol the streets and hold workshops. We refuse to assume people in need are dangerous, and we hold the powerful, including the police, accountable. We share information and feed people. We practice contextual fluidity and rely on grassroots methods like the moccasin telegram for our communications. Our mandate comes from the people, not from hierarchies or authority. We're producing a new world through our relationships and actions. We don't react, we create. In order to achieve our goals, we work with the land, with the ancestors, and with care for the future generations. We are guided by our elders and the youth. We collaborate with other people and organizations dedicated to grassroots decolonization. We stand with those who've been the targets of crimes, racism, and oppression. We honor those people who are using nonviolent methods to provide care and art for our community. We believe that safety, equity, peace, and abundance are possible for everyone. We believe in a world without prisons or police. We walk the path of decolonization by centering the voices of and experience of women, two-spirit people, and those who resist being excluded, oppressed, and bullied. We believe that those in power need us more than we need them. We believe that every one of us is damaged by settler colonialism and deserves to heal and to become a healer. The climate is changing. We believe hard times are coming and that for many of us, they're already here. We believe we will suffer alone if we don't work together. So I think that the powerful part about this group is that we've existed now for 4 years and we're still together. But maybe the secret sort of result of it is that now Thunder Bay, who at one point had just us really as the sort of radical activist group, there's now many, many groups, and there's 7 different groups that do patrols. So there's a really big change. There's other changes too that are coming from above, but I think what we're interested in is the grassroots changes. I'm also a part of another group, which I'm going to speak less about, but it formed as a way to fill a gap that was left by Window Debwe Masewin, which is that Window Debwe Masewin does not speak to media. They do not deal with the city. They do not deal with anyone who has any sort of power from above. And so we formed a group called Not One More Death. Some people that are in Debwe, but also other people who are not, who specifically can confront like settler violence through the media and through confronting power. And we've been really successful too in very different ways. Our mandate was that we were going to actively mourn every death that was, every premature death that was caused by systemic racism. And I think this is a really interesting model that other people can take up. We design ceremonies on every equinox and solstice that publicly mourn every single person that was lost that didn't need to be lost. And during times of Zoom, during the pandemic, we've done it online, offline, and hybrid form. And so you see in the upper left corner of this image, there's a picture of a fire. And so we have a lot of different events where we try to figure out ways where we can have a kind of a really deep ritual that exists online and offline, where people can send us names of people that they've lost, and we can still harvest them in a fire with an elder, and they can see that and be a part of it, even if they have to be at home, et cetera, et cetera. This image I'm really stoked about, the bigger image, which is our first action, which was maybe about 1.5 years ago. This is how we entered Thunder Bay. The Thunder Bay scene was that we were really unhappy that a constable who had slapped a teen while they were strapped to a gurney was let off with no discipline and was completely just like forgiven and let go. So we decided that every time the police mess up in such a big way, we would plant a tree on their yard. And so eventually we knew that we would have a forest. So this was the first tree planting. And this is how we kind of entered Thunder Bay. So we have a really intense relationship with the police and city council and have actually been extremely successful in pushing for pretty big changes in the city. including like the city now runs a care bus that drives around as a kind of wet shelter and place to sleep and get services and stuff that's free. So it's not all sad. I think that there's a lot of things that are kind of coming out of all the struggles that we're participating in. So I think as I've been working on this stuff in Thunder Bay and learning a lot about the necessity of different forms of care that don't come from above, as we've been in the pandemic and we've been thinking, or we've been understanding the interconnectedness of all of our health. And as coming out of many years of really thinking about and along with like the problem of debt as it kind of like slowly isolates and alienates us from each other. I was just dreaming of this project, the Hologram, which is a peer-to-peer support, viral peer-to-peer feminist health project. And I hope, I hope that the Hologram becomes a project that can become useful to anybody here who's interested. And I'm gonna kind of take a big dive into it now. And I hope that we can somehow at the end maybe put together some of the pieces between like what is going on in Thunder Bay and some of the sort of work that has happened there, and then what is possible when we organize base centering health in the Hologram. So the text on the top of the screen says, where strategic peer support rebuilds trust and begins to construct a network of transformation and interdependence that can outlast capitalism. The Hologram is two things for me. First, it is a story or a rumor. So it is like totally enough in a way to just know that it exists and to talk about it. And in a weird way, it has existed mostly as parafiction for me since 2016 when I first kind of started to think about it. So if we say that something is happening and is possible, like maybe it's true. Like maybe we can build an economy that has no money, that's built on a completely different distribution of labor and attention. The second part of the Hologram is that it is a very rigorous, refined social practice. Like it is something, a peer-to-peer support network that has a very structured approach that anyone can use and anybody can change. It is an anarchist project with a lot of structure at the front so that more people can use it. The website at the bottom of the page says http // and we have a very fancy kind of in process website, which I hope you check out later when you have more questions. We like to say that the Hologram is a project that's being invisibly practiced and used from couches and beds all over the world. And it used to be a lie and now it's real. So maybe we went from parafiction to parareal. The project itself came from looking at debt. So early 2010s, there was a debt crisis in Greece, which is completely tied to a long colonial history, but nevertheless, there was a financial crisis in Greece where the EU told or made Greece claim bankruptcy. And so because they did that, the EU was able to sort of take control of Greece's budgets and say, cut 40% of the amount of money that they had to fund like medicine in their medical system. At the very same time as that was happening, and lots of cuts were happening to all sorts of social systems because of it, there was a huge influx of migrants escaping violence and war and different forms of oppression and scarcity from the Middle East, from Africa, entering Greece. And so you had a lot of people who needed a lot of care at the same time as the medical system was collapsing because of austerity. And the amazing thing at the time was that at its height, there were 60 different completely free clinics that opened all over Greece called social solidarity clinics. So they were volunteers, doctors, anarchists, NGO workers, all kinds of different people working on these. But the amazing thing is that It didn't just stop there. There were different clinics that were interested in not only providing free care, but also challenging what it means to give really good care. And so at the Social Solidarity Clinic of Thessaloniki, I found out that there was a project called the Integrative Care Model, where they were trying to upend some of the hierarchies that are implicit in care, in medicine. So the group did lots of different types of work to undermine hierarchies, to challenge them, to play with them. But there was one particular project that I found so incredibly moving and breathtaking. And at the time I was living in San Francisco in the Bay Area, with no access to medical care, no medical insurance, and no sort of, no stability. And that was not just me, that was everyone I knew. So at the time, what I learned was kind of rumor, which was that if you went to this clinic, you were not called a patient, you were called an incomer. And that was because they did not want to infer that a person who was coming in was broken and needed to be fixed. They're not different than a doctor, they were just an incomer, they were coming in. And that's what differentiated them from the people that they would be seeking care from. Everybody needs care. So the incomer would come in and they'd be seen by a therapist, a social worker, and a doctor. And those people would ask them questions that were very holistic about, where do they work and what do they eat and who is their family and to whom do they owe debts and are they lonely? The whole like really trying to draw a big picture of a person's health. The goal of the meeting was by the end to have a good picture of what to cause the person, the incomer, to actually ask for what they need, for them to be able to say, like, this is what I need from you, 3 caretakers, in order for me to be okay for the next year. And this plan was meant to be made outside of money. So this, to me, coming from the Bay Area, seemed mildly impossible. But I think at the time, it felt impossible and also like something almost not interesting for most people, because in a weird way, in 2016, before Trump, we weren't really ready to admit that we were having a crisis in the US, that there was a healthcare crisis already. And so at the time, it felt like a project that not a lot of people were very interested in, to think about how to apply what they were doing in Greece. But then obviously by the time of the pandemic, these questions became at the forefront, questions around healthcare systems. But the question for me has always been, how do you organize your own care before or during an emergency within a set of completely unstable conditions? At the time, in 2016, when I was thinking about this with a small group of people who were also really precarious, we were just wondering how would we possibly produce something like what they were doing in Greece? Like, we have a crisis that's completely connected to what's happening in Greece, in ways that are kind of like beyond belief how they're connected. And yet, like, we don't have access to experts, we don't have access to space or money or stability. So these questions became really important. Like, specifically, like, how can we do this when we're all a little sick? Like, how can we organize a care system when we've been taught that we can only trust experts and there's no experts that are going to help us for free? And I think the really intense thing that we realized is that, like, how do we organize a peer-to-peer health model or a non-hierarchical medical system when we don't trust ourselves? So these were the questions that we started with. And our idea at the time was just pretty light. We were just going to distribute the labor of attention and care between each other. And so we decided to try it out as a peer-to-peer model. And instead of having 3 experts like they did in Greece, we would try it out with 3 people that we knew. We began to call the person, instead of an incomer, a hologram. And that's because one of the people that a psychologist, a kind of elder psychologist who designed the integrative model that the hologram is modeled after, has spent a lot of time talking to me about this project. And what she told me was, the first time I met her, was that after being a psychologist for many, many decades, when she started in the integrative model, and she was a psychologist among a doctor and a therapist, or a doctor and a social worker, she was able to see the people she was caring for in all their dimensions. And she literally said to me, it's like the difference between seeing a person as a piece of paper and seeing a person as a hologram. And I wrote it in my notebook and underlined it 50 times and was like, what is even happening? So ever since, I think we've been unpacking what this metaphor of the hologram means, and it means a lot. But we wanted to figure out if we could take this hologram and have the hologram become a person who invites 3 people to support them by asking them questions about the things that the professional caretakers would have been doing if we were in Greece, in Thessaloniki. So the 3 people that ask questions, we call them the triangle. So obviously the whole process is about meetings. Those meetings we'll talk about more, but they happen as frequently as a group decides to have them. The main project, the main practice in the project is about learning how to ask good questions. So the triangle's main job is not to be an expert in any way, but to ask questions and to become better and better at observing the hologram and asking better and better questions that help them speak more and understand more about their own situation. Imagine having a 2-hour meeting where 3 people ask, where you ask someone tons of questions alongside 2 other people. The person, the hologram, when they speak, you begin to be able to see patterns in them. So you can see patterns of speech, maybe a certain way that they describe themselves over and over again, a certain set of words they use. Maybe if you imagine meeting them every 3 months for a year, you begin to see patterns of behavior. So a big part of this project is about seeing a person, seeing their patterns. Those patterns are always related to their conditions, but they're also patterns that, people internalize their conditions and reproduce them. So I think there's lots of different, really interesting pattern seeing and discussion in this project. The third job of the triangle is to do co-research. So imagine being a hologram, having 3 people talk to you over, say, like 3 years. They really know you. They really know what you've been through in those years. And then all of a sudden a doctor tells you need to have a really expensive surgery. And that is a really intoxicating, overwhelming projection, and really hard to actually understand how to make a good decision in that situation. So one of the most critical parts of this project is that if you have a long-term triangle, that they can actually help you ask the right questions of professional medical systems so that you can make decisions that are your decisions and not controlled by profiteering medical systems or doctors that might have good intentions but really can only afford to see you for 10 minutes at a time. So this idea of doing co-research together is an amazing part of the project. And the goal is that you don't have to make big decisions alone. You have 3 people that have seen you through lots of stuff. And then over time, the triangle becomes like a different type of living medical record. So I have a triangle, like they already know more than anybody else about me, like about what are the things that connect my mother to my house, to my arm, to my skin. It's like these people that really can see all these different parts of you. So one of the most important aspects of the project is that the person who we call the hologram, we see them as an expert. And that is really different than how we do medicine, Western medicine. Biomedical institutions turn us into weak, broken, help-seeking, desperate people. And I think that the hologram really wants to invert that. The person who seeks care has a bunch of information, and they are the expert about their own health, their own life, their own story. And this is really important, and I think takes a lot of work to get to. And then one step deeper, I think, is actually the idea of the person who's seeking help is your teacher. And the way that works in this project is that Like when you begin to set up your hologram and you ask 3 people if they would be willing to meet with you for 2 hours, and then you explain to them what you would like them to do and how you would like them to do it, that means that it's possible for them to do the same thing. And that is so empowering in the weirdest way, because I think basically nobody knows right now in our society that this is okay. No one knows that it's okay to ask for support. So it really has to be modeled. The triangle has such a cool job. It is so like fun actually to be a triangle member. Just I think it's really, really crucial to kind of shed the idea that we're going to solve someone's problems, and to shed the idea that we need to be experts in order to help someone else. The whole thing with a triangle is that we are trying to understand how someone else feels. And we're trying to feel along with them, like to be really close next to them. We're not trying, though, to save a sinking ship. We are just like, where are you? How did you get here? How can I feel? How can I just touch how you feel? And so I think that this takes a lot of pressure off of the idea that, like, in order to offer quality support, you have to know something. I think it's the opposite. You have to be curious and you have to be patient, but I don't think you have to come in as an expert. And this can really, I think this part of the project has begun to undo some of the hard lines that have been drawn around who can and who cannot give care. Because those lines are racially drawn lines, and they're drawn based on gender, and they're drawn based on our experiences. But I think a real goal of the project is to give people a chance to believe that they can actually support somebody else, just with what they already know and who they already are. There is a huge amount of space for like artists and creative people in this project, because I think asking questions can be a really creative process, but I think it also, asking questions and observing somebody and how they react to questions can teach anybody how to be more curious and how to ask better questions. And then over time, I think you have the honor to become somebody else's living medical record, like to really, really understand like what a person, like what they're made of. And it teaches you so much about yourself, of course, always. Here's a little, do it, there we go, oops. So the project is meant to be viral, and it doesn't work if it's not, for so many reasons. So the hologram, their job is to make sure that the 3 people that support them have support. And I think we understand very well after going through the pandemic that it sucks to get care from someone who isn't cared for, and we can't do it anymore. So in this project, reciprocity is challenged. Like the sort of capitalist forms of reciprocity is not acceptable in this project. So the hologram does not give back what they receive. And that is hard. That is a hard pattern to undo. So exchange looks different. The hologram does not turn around to her triangle and say, okay, so after you've asked me all kinds of things about myself, like, and how are you, and do the same thing. They ask, are you getting the support you need? And can I support you to get a triangle, or to get the type of support that would make you feel your best? And so that is quite a different, it's quite a stretch for many people at first. I think also anybody that's a part of a disability community, or a community of sick people, or even a group, an intergenerational community, knows that you never really just give or receive care. Like it's always a two-way street when you're a part of community. Like we've learned that we buy our care in capitalism, but this is training for a totally different experience, where a part of you feeling well is giving care and receiving care, and that it doesn't have to get stuck between 2 people. It flows between people, it grows, and it's more about creating culture than it is about creating a kind of one-to-one loop, or even a small loop of like 3 or 4 people. And the project is incredibly difficult at first. This slide says that everyone who does the project will hit a wall of their own distrust and disbelief. And that distrust and disbelief is basically 95% of the time about whether or not you deserve care from people you know, or whether or not you feel that other people would want to give you care, attention, time. And what has happened overwhelmingly in the last year as we've been practicing this more and more with more people is that people are so excited to be asked. Like they're so excited to know what to do to support each other and to have that be clear. It's a huge, it's like it feels for so many people like asking for support from 3 people is like a boulder you have to climb, but it's like you climb up the boulder and then it turns out that you just hop off and it's like 2 inches and it's like, it's such a thing. It's so different than how we perceive, I think. The project is incredibly slow and it really, really challenges our relationship to time, I think, in a really beautiful way. I think like as the project grows, as you invite 3 people to support you and you wait for those people to organize their own holograms, I think there's a lot of pressure to have the project continue to move at a pace that we can see. But it is the opposite. It moves at the pace that people and relationships move, which is incredibly slow, it turns out. And that is super beautiful about this project. And everything about it is incredibly gradual. I think the other thing I want to say about this one is just that, so there's an incredible amount of structure in the project as it is right now. There's a lot of like, not standards, there's a lot of like timing and ideas and like, this is what you do first and this is what you do second, and this is what you do third. But the goal is that right now we're setting something up that moves virally between people and it changes as it grows. So I have 3 people that look after me, but their holograms are going to look quite different than mine does because they're going to learn from what does and doesn't work in my hologram and they're going to change it. And so hopefully like 5 generations in, we have new forms arriving. So the goal is definitely not to kind of keep things standard. The goal is definitely to send some shoots out and see what happens as people morph the virus. And then I just like to add that like, I think that this is such an interesting moment to see the question of like how you like your support, like how you need and want support as a really creative question that we can press on and that we can hold, and that this can actually be like, it feels, I think quite loaded for a lot of people, but this is a question that I think we can all really hold on to and chew on right now, especially as many of us, not all of us by any means, kind of excuse ourselves from the isolation of the pandemic. So let's see. Yeah, okay. So I think we have a new website, and this website has an area that's for incomers. And I just wanted to show you some of what we're working on at the moment. So we teach courses online, and those courses are for all different types of people, and they're for specific groups of people, like healthcare workers. We did a healthcare workers workshop for 6 weeks. We've done a workshop for people who have trouble asking for help. We've done a course for, we're going to do our first course for people who identify as men. And we're going to keep going, having really sort of focused courses. And now we have a kind of trained group of facilitators who can teach all kinds of different courses. So those courses are meant for people who want to become holograms. And in that way, we kind of want to sort of set the world up with a bunch of people who really know how to do this, so that it can begin to spread in different places through like individual people as kind of portals. We also have a project called Minimum Viable Hologram, which is where people can sign up to basically have a facilitated session online. Like, you know, you can invite 3 of your friends and you'll have a facilitator kind of bring you through the whole process of your first meeting. And then there's texts here online under Create My Hologram that will help you set up your first hologram meeting, just with some instructions. When we do MVHs, minimum viable holograms, we basically have one person invite 3 friends to come online, and a facilitator brings them through a 2-hour ritual where the 3 friends of the hologram basically get to just ask tons and tons of questions around one specific issue that the hologram brings to the room. And it is so incredible what happens in 2 hours. And so using Zoom with all of the sort of issues and problems that can come up with trying to connect to people in a real way in a new group on Zoom, I think we've found some really incredible structures for how to actually make connections happen and make transformation possible even in 2 hours. Actually, before I leave that one, it's important to say that actually as of right now and for the next few months, we have, I think, 16 facilitators doing minimum viable holograms online. And so if you were to go on the on the webpage for the hologram and go to like the hologram/MVH, you'd be able to sign up for one. And it's free and it's a super high quality experience. And I think really, really surprising. And that was just now, for the first time in a year, open to just anyone. So I think everyone that's interested, we have the capacity to support. One of our first course was called, Is This the End or Is This the Beginning? And it was 28 people from around the world during the first week of lockdown in April of 2020. And those people many of them have become central organizers for the hologram. In the courses and in many of the workshops, we've decided to sort of experiment with the idea of using the personal pronoun we, which has been really, really interesting and adventurous and challenging in so many different ways. But it's a practice that I always like to just share and put out there, that you can have a conversation and you can all use we, and it distributes responsibility. And it can also distribute solidarity. Like, it's a really interesting experiment to try. And we've held one full 6-week workshop only using that among 30 people as we debated whether we should use it or not, et cetera, et cetera. It's super interesting. The last part of, like, the last sort of fundamental element of the hologram right now is that we have a really big group of people that meet every month. So anyone that's taken a course or done a minimum viable hologram, or who's practicing their own hologram somewhere in the world, they can come to a monthly Zoom meeting. And we basically have 2 or 3 rounds of a talking circle where people basically explain what are the tensions and problems and questions they have in the hologram, in their holograms. And then everyone it becomes a laboratory, and everybody sort of supports each other to sort of figure out and respond to different situations, as we're really putting ourselves out there to try to see like what's possible in terms of what we can do together in producing our own autonomous care. And then this is my sort of last little rant, because I think it's important to just sort of put a container on the project, kind of ideologically, where it's going, where it's not going. So this is not a practice that is meant to replace what social systems, governments should be providing for all people. All people deserve high quality access to all healthcare. So this is definitely not a replacement for it, but it is training for post-capitalist future. And I think specifically meant to create stability and health for people so that they can take risks to destroy the systems that are no longer working or serving them, and to build new stuff. It is completely based on the belief that we're a cooperative species and we just need a chance to practice. And I have to say that it's a really fun practice. Like, it's actually a place where cooperation, even with hardcore resources like our time and emotional energy, it is very energetically and socially lucrative. Difference and change are our greatest powers. Healing is difficult. The person who needs help is also the most important teacher and is powerful. and we can collectively solve our problems without permission or authority. So those are the things that I just never want to leave out. And then finally, I guess this is kind of like an image as a blessing towards difficult healing, post-capitalist work, and popular unrest, unpopular rest. I'm using unpopular rest in a really specific way there because one of my very favorite artists is named Melanie Gilligan, and she made a series of short films called Popular Unrest, which are available for free online at popularunrest.org. She's a real prophet and made some films about the future of finance and algorithms and tech in around 2009, 2010 that I find to be extremely prophetic and are a major inspiration, and like another thing like almost as strong as the solidarity clinics that helped form what the hologram is and why it exists. And we're just finishing a short film with her. So that will be coming out, that is about the hologram. And that should be coming out sometime this summer. And I will be very excited to share that with you all. I keep meaning to do this and forgetting, but I think that maybe one of the most important things that we've been working on in the hologram has to do with this drawing. So it's a triangle and the top says introspection. The bottom two parts of the triangle say cooperation and organization. And I think there's a lot of powerful organizers that come out of Evergreen. So I don't want to miss my opportunity to talk about this and get feedback. We in the hologram have a really powerful handhold on the way to combine introspection and cooperation in a really big way. But I think that our leap right now is to try to figure out like how to take those things and make them a part of a complete triangle that includes strategic organization. So the goal of the project is like, it is a giant anti-capitalist organizing structure. And I think that the sort of place we're at is trying to sort of really decentralize it, make it sustainable, make it live outside of the art world, take my name away from it so that it can become just like a shared practice owned by whoever uses it. But the really like the big, deep, long-term wish of, I think, everybody that's involved with it is that it somehow the structure becomes available and useful for really big strategic organizing that actually does begin to destroy some of the oppressive forces and systems that are making us need to do so much care work. There's lots of different kind of nascent ideas about it, but I think that this is the crux of like what is the most exciting and interesting part to me. And this drawing is by my partner Max Haven, and I've stolen it off of his wall and completely taken it over and use it all the time for the hologram. I think that's it. I think maybe we can do some questions if anybody has them.
Well, I think actually we should try to engage in some popular unrest, or at any rate, we should do some clapping. I don't know, is Miranda around, and are you ready to unmute, and we can maybe give Cassie a brief round of applause. Thank you so much, Cassie. Really just an incredible project, and the context that you offered, so moving and energizing to see this project. We've got time for Q&A. There's a raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, so that would allow participants to unmute and voice your question. We also have the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. That would allow you to type a question in. I know there are a few questions there already. You're also able to use the chat. You should be able to use the chat if you wanted to offer some comments or what have you. So bring it on. Bring it on. Use your hands. Use your Q&A. And I think I'll pass it to Miranda Mellis for an opening question.
Thank you, Cassie. So much to say. I wanted to just echo something Cassie said to everyone here. Everyone that's interested, we have the capacity to support, and it's free. That was an offer, an invitation to participate in Hologram. Everyone that's interested, we have the capacity to support, and it's free. Wow, take that in. And then, you know, this moment of describing the sort of skills that get developed as within the hologram process. How can I touch how you feel? And you don't have to be an expert to give care. So I'll start the discussion. I wanted to just say, so it's clear that, you know, social service systems are abjected in capitalism, right? You know, like if you are making use of a shelter, food pantry, welfare, and so forth, capitalism says, oh, those things over there are, they're abjected. They are somehow, they're somehow not how things are supposed to be, and yet keeps getting produced and proliferating. And I see part of your work as being about actually valorizing spaces like of social care, right? So we could say, you know, all the spaces like that, that in some ways are the closest that we come in a capitalist system to a socialistic kind of system, right? Like if you spend time in a shelter, you see people share resources and so forth. There's like commons operating and so on. So I think I just wanted to kind of mention, you know, this notion of valorizing and energizing spaces where mutual aid and care are happening, but understanding that in the context that we're in, the sort of system of care it's treated as a zone of shame. And so anyway, maybe there's more to say about that later, but my question, I was really thinking about how it isn't just individuals that get isolated, but families, right? Families, family systems, right? Whether there are kind of disabilities that happen or economic issues, all kinds of things that go on. And I wondered, could a family be a hologram? And if that's something you've considered. Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah. So I've gotten really interesting emails before. So there's a book about the hologram. I didn't say that, but like that's how people know about it, is because there's a book. And I'm happy to email the PDF out to anybody that wants it, and it's on Pluto Press. But so because of that though, people email me cold and say, I live in a remote part of Nebraska with my wife, and we were wondering if we can be in each other's holograms. And like I think that it's so like sweet and cute, because I think like in so many ways like we're just not really sure who it would be okay to ask for support from. So that a lot of people start out wanting to just do it with their families, or the second most popular desire is for people to want to do it with people they've never met before. Maybe the latter is much more of a normal request. So the thing that I would say about people doing it with their families is that I think it can be really good as long as it is diversified with other people in other places. And I think a really powerful part about the hologram right now that I've noticed is like because it's on the internet, and it can be in person, but right now, since it's mostly on the internet, people are able to get energy and information from places far outside of them. And so I know one person told me today that she meets with her sister, her oldest best friend, and somebody that she met on a vacation 6 years ago, and they talk once a year. And so then she gets this energy and information from 3 very different sources. And those people also get to kind of like see each other, see her. And so I think families can do it, but I think like it's you'd never want to have like your mom, your sister, and your mom, your sister, and your aunt all, I think, surround you like that, because you want to maybe bring in more information, more ideas, and more of a diversity of questions and perspectives. And the other thing about that diversity thing is like, at the moment, it just feels like one city or one geographic location at a time is going through so much. Like the crises are not equally distributed, but they are slowly, it's like sort of moving. It's sort of like watching a chess game around the world where like one sort of city or country or place goes down just as another one is being repaired. And so there's something I think really incredible about sort of having a distributed hologram where when your house is on fire, maybe your holograms aren't. And so there's a bit of like distributed reliability that's geographic. And then, yeah, but like I think that having some family members are involved is really cool. And I have like the sort of one of the main people I facilitate the courses with, Lita Wallace, is an incredible youth worker and housing activist. And it's been really interesting because she's slowly brought in like her sister and her mom to the hologram courses. And now her whole family's practicing it, but they're practicing it alongside each other and not all in each other's holograms. And that seems really sane, because then it's like everybody's got to practice and there's something to talk to each other about, but you don't have to be all up in each other's details necessarily. And the last thing is that shelter thing you were saying about how like it's like the shelter system, or like where care is really needed and felt and given, like it's so wild how it is like sort of put to the side, to the periphery, and seems like it's like it's the outside of capitalism or outside of society, but it's really the center. And that illusion is so hard to like regulate yourself with that, like, or to sort of be able to come home to that contradiction. But I see it so much, and the shelter system here is like, it's so big, it's so needed, and it's so underfunded, and it's very strange. It's actually a very wealthy place. It has -40 winters. There's a huge population of people that are homeless, and yet there's no planning around that. And so every year it's a surprise when there's too many homeless people to put in the shelters, and that like it's really cold and those people will die if they don't find shelter. And so it's so strange that it just stays at the periphery like that. It's like the periphery of the mind of the government, the periphery of the planning of the province. Yeah.
So we've got time for more questions. We've got a few that are already posted through the Q&A. So please keep those coming. And if you'd like to voice your question, you can use that raise hand function and we should be able to get you unmuted. I had one comment, and then I think we can go to one of the questions that's been posted. And this builds off of what you just were sharing, Cassie, about the periphery, the thing that's actually at the very center. One of the primary outputs of the system is narrativized to the margins. And as you were just describing, the weather situation, the housing situation, it's kind of an afterthought. Similarly, here in the Pacific Northwest, One of the phrases that we've been using in reimagining community safety, it's an old Roman phrase, salus populi lex suprema esto, which is the health of the people or the safety of the people should be the highest law. And what I love about this hologram project is we get to make that law. You're helping us to unlearn and rethink structures and hierarchies. And so the safety of the people should indeed be, the safety or the health of the people should indeed be the highest law. And we get to make it so, rather than waiting for ambulance to come.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be abstract or theoretical. Like, I think that that's the thing, is that I think like there's so much that's so abstract, and people so often, I think, that come into the hologram, like into events or courses, it's like they're used to living with a level of like abstraction or symbolism, but actually, like, I think just giving ourselves a chance to just do it, both in Window Debwe Masewin and the hologram, it's just all about having a practice. So that idea of actually centering like the production of health and life, it's not just an idea, it's something that we feel like we can touch and experience. I'm so grateful to have some practices where that feels like it's not just an abstraction.
Absolutely. As part of your mission statement, you guys wrote, we are producing a new world through our relationships and our actions, through a praxis. So beautiful and specific. So I'm going to jump to the question that we've got here in the chat, and I can post it, it's in the Q&A, and I can post it into the chat as well. I found it interesting that you brought up capitalist forms of reciprocity. I see this come up when someone is going through a crisis, turns to me and thinks they need to reciprocate my emotional labor after they are done expressing themselves. Do you want to say more about your idea of capitalist forms of reciprocity?
Yeah. I think like we really, really believe in the idea of exchange in capitalist culture, and that like in some way like exchange needs to be sort of at the front of any giving and taking that happens. And so it's, to me, I'm really just learning about it. I had like an intuition about it, and then realized that lots of people have written about the feminist gift economy and processes of giving and taking outside of exchange. But I think like in a really like practical sense, like most people that first participated in the hologram, they really, really could not understand or allow themselves to participate in something where they were receiving something without immediately giving something back. So it's just like what you said with your friend, that your friend is in trouble even, and immediately before, during, or after whatever sort of support they're receiving from you, they want to know how they can give it back so that they can get rid of the feeling of being a burden. And so that fear of like being a burden, which comes to us for so many different reasons, means that like I just think no one is really willing to take the risk to accept anything if they don't already know that they can give something back, so that they won't be in debt. And this fear of debt and indebtedness is so powerful for people, whether they've actually experienced financial debt and being like sort of controlled by money in that way, or even just conceptually by living in a society that's organized around debt. It's like this humongous amount of fear around accepting something that you can't reciprocate for. And yeah, I mean, there's so much to say about it. Mickey Kashtan and I just recently had a conversation. Mickey Kashtan is the person who I think is, I don't know if she would call herself the director of or one of the leading speakers from the Nonviolent Communication Institute in the Bay Area. But I really, really recommend like finding her as a person who can really think through and confront ideas specific to like this moment right now and our kind of addiction to exchange. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the answer, for the response, Cassie, and then the resource as well, Mickey Cashton. I'll drop something into the chat. I think we'll jump to the next question. I'm not seeing any hands rising up. So this next question that also came in through the Q&A, I think you've touched on this, but this has been an opportunity to perhaps engage again or go a little deeper. I'm wondering how these triangles exist within or outside of friend groups or interact with existing relationships, because relationships are a two-way street. And if you are a hologram receiving care from your triangle, and all of those in your triangle also have their triangles, how would that affect the one-on-one relationship between people? Is it recommended that triangles are set up with some trust established with people already, or with strangers?
Yeah, I think I said this before, and it's like so interesting to talk about. So I'll kind of describe it a little bit more, but many people that contact us really, really would like to have all strangers, or at least some strangers, in their hologram. And it seems like that has to do with what we were just talking about, a kind of fear of being a burden on people who they know are already stretched thin. Because like we know that, I mean, among us, all of our friends are going through their own struggles. There's a million layers to what's happening right now and how that affects different people. It's really hard to like be like, I see all that and I'm still going to ask you for something, where it's much easier, like many things in capitalism, to get things from people that we don't have to see. And that creates all different types of dissociation and disasters. Like even just, where do you get your cell phone? Like it's much easier. If we saw the people that were creating the cell phones, we probably wouldn't want to get them anymore. Like if we saw the processes involved in the coercive cooperation that forces people to make the cell phones the way that they do in the conditions they're in. Anyway, so there's a huge desire for people who want to work in triangles with people they don't know. And for that exact reason, it is my will, and not necessarily the will of all my collaborators, to push people to work with people that they do have pre-existing relationships with in some way, because then it's like they have to sort of see the conditions of the person and ask them, and you can see the after effects, which I think the aftermath is a positive aftermath when you invite people into your triangle, and being able to see the positive transformation of, I asked somebody who I didn't think was going to say yes for their support. They gave me the support, and now we're both better for it. I think seeing that is really important, and being able to witness the whole process. And people generally do well. Many people have many different ideas of who they want to invite and at what level of trust. I have now a kind of a routine that I go through with people when they're trying to figure out who their hologram members might be. And the most important question to me is like, who have you seen play well with others? I chose people that I've organized with, that I've done collaborative art with, or that I see can be in a group of people and like they like multiply the dignity of all the other people around them. That is very exciting to me. So that I know that all three people will make a space that I want to enter and that they want to enter. I think that it's really great to choose people whose communications you understand very well and who seem to understand you. Because, there's different people on different frequencies, and it's not necessary that like you might really like somebody and maybe want their attention, but not really have a clear sense of communication with them. And so maybe that's not a great person to start with. Maybe it is, just depends. I guess the other thing that I would say is that like some things that we've learned not to do over the process has been not to invite people because you think they might be like in a kind of like it might be intellectually stimulated by the project. I think that's a real no-go. People who you think are powerful, who you can like show the project to advance the project. We've had lots of like people go down because of trying to kind of use their relationships to spread ideas or the project. It's so much better if you kind of go towards people who you feel like a real desire for working with them on it. And then also that you, like, I think if you come to the whole project with curiosity, what would happen if we put these people together? It's like making magic and not like building yourself a prison that you have to stay in. Like, yeah, because I think for many people, like the kind of nightmare scenario is like, I built this thing and now I have to enter it. You don't want that feeling. I think you want the feeling of like of lightness. The last thing I'll say about it that I think is so important is that like the project, at the beginning of every project, we say we ask the hologram what kind of feeling do they want to produce. Like, tell me the future in 2 hours. What feeling would you like to have? And so they can say like, I would like energy. I want to laugh, or like I want to have a real deep transformation. Like they can say what they want, and we can usually do that. And so I think when you're thinking about imagining groups of people that you want to work with, it's like, what do you need that you can't necessarily produce by yourself? So I just brought the funniest people, like, and that has just been so wonderful, like just gentle, funny, hilarious, amazing people. So beyond that, I just don't think it matters. The real project is like believing that in a weird way, anybody can do it. Anybody can participate in it. Everybody's kind of got powers.
This is such a wonderful place to find ourselves 1 minute to one. Everyone can do this. And this moment of a rumor turning into relationality, activity. And I'm really hearing Cassie say, it's not about turning this into yet another project, but about the integrative. You talked about the integrative model. And so that's a sensing and a feeling into that I think will take some intuition for each person. And yeah, I love the idea of becoming somebody's living medical record and kind of just naming that, holding, that's something we do. Like you're saying, we do these things. We have these skills. We do these things, but just to kind of name it is really amazing. So Cassie, I just want to invite you in the moment that remains, if there are any last things you would like us to be aware of or know about upcoming before we say goodbye for now and see you down the road.
I think I think the big thing right now is just that anybody can access minimum viable hologram, and that is kind of our new exciting thing. And you can do it right now. And we're going to have a workshop soon that will help people to set up even their 3 people for this little facilitated ritual. And so all of that will be kind of not tweeted out, but placed in our newsletter. So you can sign up for our newsletter on the website. We're going to have a hologram course come up in June for people who identify as men. And that is very open to everybody here. It's going to be more than half people who identify as men, but other people are welcome to come too. And I think that's it. I mean, anybody who's interested is just so welcome to reach out and email me or us. And there's lots of people to talk with about it.
Great. Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, one and all. We'll see you next time. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the art lecture with Miranda Mellis. Have a great afternoon.